Hey everyone, Tactics here with my first advanced dungeon guide and walkthrough of Dragonflight Season 1, starting with the Returning Legion Dungeon Halls of Valor. In this video, I'll walk you through a timed plus 20 key on live servers, discussing how we handled each pull, the various bosses in the dungeon, and hopefully give you guys some tips and tricks specific to Halls of Valor that will help you get one timed as well. I'll post a link to the route that we used for this video as well down in the description below if you want to use it for yourself. I'll be creating videos just like this one for all 8 Dragonflight dungeons for Season 1, hopefully out in the next week or two. So if that's something you want to see, make sure you guys do subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss when those get posted. Otherwise, let's dive right into the dungeon itself. I do have it on 1.25 times speed, just a note. And right off the bat here, we are going to do a pretty large pull here. Important that the tank is the first person walking through here, just so that these guys socially aggro to the tank and follow them up the hill here while you're grouping this pull. And right off the bat, we do need a kick on that star thundercaller you saw initially. Usually we have a ranged kick. Just put one out and kick that one guy in, and we have another melee kick assigned to that mob, in this case the rogue. And on this X thundercaller here, we also have 2 melee kicks assigned to it. So basically just having 2 kicks on those thundercallers to stop those random damage bolts from going out. You saw the kick going out there. We pop Bloodlust here, and the main thing to notice is that everyone went to one side of the pack here, and the tank, and only the tank is on this other side. That's to prevent people from getting frontaled by this Drake here. Basically, this pack is pretty much just full of champions doing power attacks. The dragon, you want to pop some sort of defensive every time the lightning breath comes out, because that's the big point where some high damage intake is coming. But assuming you're stopping the thundercallers, the only damage you're worried about are those circles there, so make sure you're not cleaving that. That's unavoidable, of course. And of course, it's sanguine, so everything's going to get healed up nice and a lot, but it's okay. Not the end of the world. We are funneling the Stormdrake a little bit here. We have that Arcane Mage, that Outlaw Rogue, who pump a lot of priority damage out. So that is why the Drake is dying, and we are focusing in a bit here, because once that's dead, it's just a bunch of champions, because the Thundercallers also tend to have a lot less HP. This one got healed up by a bunch of Sanguine from that initial Thundercaller dying, but in general, they'll die a lot faster. And for these champions, a lot of people have been talking about like the power attacks, maybe giving them some trouble. So what you can do is you can backstep them a little bit. You see I backstep a little bit, just strafing to the side, backing up, jumping, and those power attacks are doing 0 damage to me. There's actually a lot of spells, and actually I'll slow it down a little bit for you guys to see a little bit better here. Move it down to maybe like 0.75 speed. There's actually a lot of spells in this dungeon that you can backstep. So see the power attacks coming out. I backstep, my health bar doesn't move. Nothing's happening. My ignore pain's not moving at all. Just jumping away, you can either backstep, like backpedal, or obviously that requires you to react a little faster. If you want to kind of milk uptime a little bit, what you can do is what I was doing, which is either turn your camera a little and hop to the side, or strafe to the side, directly away from the mob, and it puts that ability on cooldown while also causing it to do 0 damage to you. And I will point out in this dungeon, because there are a lot of tank buster mobs in this dungeon where you can do that little trick on, and it makes them go from extremely scary to virtually no damage. So it's very, very useful. Then you come to Himdall, and honestly, this is a very, very easy boss. He's almost a target dummy, not quite. So for Horn of Valor, you can see even on this fortified key, it deals a pretty significant chunk of damage, like 50%-ish to everyone. So be careful, especially on higher tyrannical keys. You don't want to get one shot by that. But basically what we do is we look at where the first dragon's going, and then we just walk on top of where that was, and then you can just plant for the rest of this combo. So if it was coming onto us first, we would instead move over one and then move back to where we initially were. Basically trying to do this phase in as little movement as possible. So either only one move if it's not on top of you, or 2 moves if it is. And that's really this entire fight. Boss dies at like 10% HP. Nothing else is really scary besides that Horn of Valor for on high tyrannical keys. Makes you have some sort of personal, even something small for every hit. I think it was getting close into one-shot territory if you go above like a 22. So just keep that in mind. At this gear level, keep that in mind as well. So with more gears, it's going to be a much higher key level where that will one-shot you. But just be careful, because that's really the only dangerous part of this fight. And obviously not standing in these swords, but like positioning wise, nothing like that really matters, assuming you're dodging the dragon beams coming across the platform. Moving up a little bit, so let's get past this boss. Oh, we skipped too far. Boss is almost dying here. And we are going to prefer to go to the right here. So we are going to wait for this Pat to leave because this is 2 champion mobs. Now, as I just mentioned, these champion mobs basically do nothing because you can completely avoid their tank buster. So there's 2 mobs that do nothing and 1 caster in the Mystic. And something to note for this caster in the Mystic is that the big heal it does is stoppable and kickable, so you don't need to dump a bunch of kicks into it. You can actually just assign stops. So this will leave the pull as 3 champions, a shield maiden for the tank to deal with, 2 of these mystics which can be stopped or kicked, and then the rune carver which can also be stopped or kicked because it's a channeled attack. So we can mix up a bunch of what we're using, stops, kicks, everything like that will work. Into the etch that will deal a lot of random damage as well, so that's important. And you can see here we have the markers, so we have 1 person assigned to each for both stops and kicks, and then we have everyone else assigned to the rune carver to kick that cast as well. And honestly, it's also not even the end of the world if the little sigil goes off from these mystics. Radiant is what you really want to substitute, like Fear's there. Rune of Healing, see, we just immediately move out. Not even a big deal, like nothing actually happened. It's actually less healing than Sanguine. So really, really not a big deal with Rune of Healing, especially if you're like a heavy ranged kick comp for whatever reason. You can just ignore the Rune of Healing and just only ever kick or stop the Radiance and the Etch casts from the other caster there, and it'll be just fine. Just make sure your tank is moving. Note the Shield Maiden, another thing that Mortal Hue completely avoided, didn't get a stack of any debuff. Both of the attacks from that Shield Maiden are backsteppable, like the champions, and I'll show that off actually in the big Shield Maiden pull, because you didn't really see it too great here. The next pull is a bit of a pain to set up. You have to wait on 2 pats here. You want the Sentinel to be way past you, and you don't actually want this Shield Maiden in this left pack in it as well. So you see I'm waiting here for that Shield Maiden to actually leave. Then I'm tapping this 2 pull, then I'm tapping this pull over here, and then I'm going to LOS around this corner. I think I almost die here because I forgot to shield block. Note shield block is important, so keep that up. And then basically just another pack where you have 2 mystics. You do have a Thundercaller here, so we have a kick rotation on the Thundercaller, 2 melee kicks on the Thundercaller, and then we have a kick and a stop assigned to Mystics as well, just to make sure those Holy Radiances in particular aren't going off. And if Rune of Healing gets stopped as well, bonus, but not the end of the world that Rune of Healing goes off. And you can see me doing a little bit of backstepping there to dodge these Shield Maiden casts, see, not getting any stacks of any debuff, just backing up a little bit. And as long as your like party knows you're doing this, it's really not a big deal, right? Like there are ground effect AoE classes, sure, but if they're like leading you a little bit and you're kiting a little bit into them every time, it's not the end of the world, right? Like Ellie Shaman's leading with Earthquake, for example. I don't know, Frost Mages leading with Blizzard, if you see any of those ever, that kind of thing, or Destro Warlocks, right? So just keep that in mind. It is a huge amount of mitigation you're getting just by not taking damage from any of those tank buffs. From here, we just kind of hide into the corner. Note that that Pat can be a little scary. I think it does end up getting right near us by the end of this, maybe. So be careful with that. But nothing crazy in this. Just, of course, Thundercaller, again, which we have kicks on, sorry. And the Rune Carver, also, which we have kicks or stops on for that Etch cast there. I really don't want that going off because it is a lot of ticking damage into a random target. So we just kill these. Sanguines are going down. With 1 Shield Maiden, it's really not a big deal. Like, I kind of just sit here and tank it. What you're going to see, it is a big deal in this next pack right after this. Just slowly moving away because the Pat's coming in. We do pull all 4 of these Shield Maidens, as well as we put a range kick initially on that guy. But honestly, it's really not the end of the world. This Purifier doesn't get kicked. It's not going to kill anyone, assuming you avoid it, whoever is targeted. But mostly we have everyone but the tank trying to kick that Purifier. And you see here, I have a big path here to kite. They've left me this path open because, of course, if I backstep, but they're still in front of the mob, they are still going to get frontaled. So that's not ideal. So as soon as I start getting a few stacks, you see I do start backstepping a little bit here. It's like dodging that Mortal Hue. Let that Breach Armor go off. I'm just tanking here, but now I'm going to start backing up. I've done a Shockwave to be able to give myself some space, back up away from these guys, avoid it all, and you can jump off this edge here to give yourself some more space, and then start kiting back up this way. Basically just a lot of backstepping, and if you look at my debuffs this whole time, like where I've had 1 Breach debuff, and now it's going to expire, and I might get us something else because I'm now sitting in the pack tanking it, dodge the second Mortal Hue, get 1 more of these debuffs, right? But like I'm dodging almost every single debuff in this pack and taking very little damage in the process, while also not moving the pack a huge amount. And for the most part, dodging Sanguine as well. So it's a very, very useful tip for tanks, specifically in Halls of Valor, because there are so many mobs and so many dangerous mobs that have those abilities you can backstep. But it is not only for this dungeon, and in this series I will talk about the different dungeons and scary mobs that you can use backstepping on to avoid their abilities. From here, we do pull this mini boss. I actually think with a priest, we probably should have skipped this, honestly. It just gives you a lot more room for this platform to play with on the boss itself, so we do end up pulling it, not the end of the world there. Watch that blast of light placement, right? You can see both with the range placement and the actual tank positioning, you can have this guy not move very far from the pack to keep cleave up, as well as have that frontal pointed away from everyone so no one needs to actually dodge. There is that whole like bouncing back and forth between LOS, but I honestly don't think that's good because the person bouncing back and forth for LOS doesn't get any uptime themselves because they're busy bouncing back and forth. You can just, with the positioning, solve the cleave problem. There's no need to be cute and like bounce around this pillar at all to get that. I've seen that a lot in a lot of pugs as well, so not necessary at all. Just position well and you're good. Then we have Solstin. This guy, again, showing off the boss mechanics here. Not too much to talk about. This guy does scale off Fortified, so keep that in mind. He'll be harder on Fortified weeks. But one thing to note is the Arcing Bolt, both this and the boss cast. It is instant, and it does tend to happen right after the Eye of the Storm, so you may want to pre-spread a little bit. Not too much to talk about, though, for either of these mini-bosses. Really, just kill them. You know, don't get hit by Sanctify. Stand in the bubble. Kick this guy. We do pop a Bloodlust here on Herja. I think it's been like maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes since we used our first Bloodlust, so not too much time wasted there. We start Lightning Side, and basically what's very, very important, particularly on Tyrannical weeks here, is to make sure that you have CDs planned out for Eye of Storm. Usually we would have Lust on pull rolling. I think our mage forgot to press Bloodlust in this video, but usually you would have Bloodlust rolling on pull here, so that would help. And we do like a very minor CD, so I use Rally usually for this first one here to help out a bit. And then Rally plus Bloodlust would be enough for us. We save Darkness for the second Eye of the Storm, and then we have immunities and stuff for the third. So like we would commit Cloak and Ice Block so that the healer only has to focus on a few players for that area. But a big thing here is that Arcing Bolt. Like I mentioned, it comes immediately after the Eye of the Storm. So you see we kind of do spread out a little bit, and we have players break immediately after this Eye of the Storm. But look at the health pools, right? Someone gets zapped right there instantly. Luckily, Fortified, it's on a ton of damage, but it's really rough on Tyrannical, so be very, very careful of that. Shield of Light as well for the tank is a pretty heavy hitting ability on Tyrannical weeks. So like we did a 21 Tyrannical no lever hulls last week, and basically with a going into defensive stance for the hit, as well as a spell reflect and a full ignore pain, left me at like 20% HP on a 21 Tyrannical. So very, very scary. There's nothing else really to worry about tank damage wise. So as long as you're surviving, it doesn't matter how little you're surviving by, but make sure you survive that Shield of Light hit and you don't beam anyone out with it. Note that we have a very clear path here to get beamed across the platform, and we do switch every single time the ultimate ability comes out. So Eye of the Storm or Sanctify. Note that I will try and actually milk the holy stacks a little bit on this side, just so the boss has fewer lightning stacks when the Eye of the Storm goes out. That's much more important for the Tyrannical keys, as I mentioned, because that damage can get very, very scary. But like, I'm going to hang out here. I'm going to hang out here. And I'm just waiting because I'd much rather have the boss at lower lightning stacks of the debuff, of the buff rather, than have like a 1 or 2 more, because that's a lot of extra damage when this scales into higher key levels, right? You want to minimize the number of lightning buff stacks this boss has when Eye of the Storm goes out. It's not the biggest deal, like I mentioned, on a fortified key, but Tyrannical is definitely scary. Like, this is a Darkness and PI commit on this one. And then the next one is immunities. Actually, I think we might kill before the next one, but the next one would be immunities like Ice Block and Cloak, as you see up there, just to make the healer's life a lot easier. They have to focus on much fewer people. But yeah, that is this boss. Definitely recommend committing Bloodlust here, Fortified or Tyrannical. Pretty value, but it's much scarier on Tyrannical for sure. Definitely a boss that can kind of make or break your key. Moving on here, we run down all the way across towards Fenrir. We pulled this 4-pack in the corner. We also can pull that pack up top as well. Nothing new about these packs besides the marksman. Note some changes. This marksman penetrating shot is now stoppable. I know in my other Halls of Valor guide from beta that was not stoppable. It would recast. Now it doesn't recast, and there's also a lot of abilities that no longer recast anymore, so I will be talking about those in all these new advanced guides. But penetrating shot, make sure you stop that. It's a line attack targeted at the tank, but it is fully stoppable. Moving on, you could also pull this pack here. I think what ends up happening is we actually pull this pack after, just because of the padding of the guy in the middle here, which we don't want to pull, and it ends up biting us in the butt a little bit there. So I'll talk about that when we get to it, but you can just do this pack now and like pull it over, LOS it into the corner a little bit, like this area here, just to pull it away from that patrol, make your life a little easier. Also, we didn't do the dragon skip here, so this dragon obviously now auto aggroes to you, but if you send like a stealth class or a night elf through solo initially, they can like vanish, greater invis, or shadow meld or whatever this guy off, and then you can have everyone sneak around it. Though honestly, I don't actually think killing this guy is too bad. He doesn't really do too much. He's a bit of free percent, but killing a single mob kind of sucks. My guess is maybe you'll end up pulling some of these ox mobs onto this dragon to maybe get some cleave going. But realistically, like, this mob is quite a decent chunk of percent, right? It's 3% for the mob alone. Doesn't have a ton of HP. It's just killing a single mob alone is kind of sucky feeling in the keys for sure, but the timer does give you the time to do that, so not the end of the world there. So we kill this guy, and then we hug the right wall here. Ignore me missing the jump and jumping continuously into a tree, and you just hug the wall around here. You can sap this guy for safety, but it's not needed, and we get straight to Fenrir without pulling another piece of trash. And then we get to this boss, which is either very, very difficult for your healer or extremely easy, depending on your comp and whether or not you're able to avoid bleeds. In terms of what classes can do that, it is Rogue, who can do it almost every single time, Hunter, who can do it almost every single time, Mages with greater invis, who can kind of fill in gaps, and then any Night Elf with Shadow Meld. And so what I mean is kind of like if you guys did the boss from Mechagon Workshop, back in Season 4 or in BFA. Cujo, I believe the name was, but basically the leaps work exactly like that. So it will always target the furthest player. Always the furthest targeted player will be jumped to first, and if that player is able to actually cancel mid-air, so as you see here, Rogue's rolling out, he's going to vanish. The mob gets there, but he's vanished, so the jump doesn't continue. Nobody gets a bleed stack. If you're the first person to do that, you cancel the entire series of jumps. If you're not the furthest person to do that, obviously that the other people before you will still get jumped to, and you can still cancel your own bleed. But if you stack everyone else in melee and have the person dodging run out, then that every single bleed in the combo will be prevented, and makes it much easier to heal when no one has the infinitely stacking bleed, for sure. Other than that, just making sure everyone is in that claw frenzy just to mitigate the damage, because that is split between everyone hit. So if one person's on in it, just everyone else is taking way, way, way more damage. So it's going to be a lot scarier. So that's the big thing for this boss. I can fast forward a little bit as well to show you. In this first phase, it's a little RNG because he only ever picks 2 players, right? Like here, he didn't pick the Rogue, so he picked the Demon Hunter and the Mage. So the Mage is running away. He's going to greater invis, I believe. So that's lucky, but it could pick like the Priest and the Demon Hunter, and then we can't really do anything. We just have to take those bleeds. But it's not the end of the world, especially in this early phase, because the bleeds reset at 60% here. It's a much bigger deal in the second phase, because as you can see, actually, I'll talk about the wargs after. But as you can see in the second phase, right, when he jumps to 4 targets in this phase. Note that these Ebon Claw Packmates, they are not nearly as dangerous as the trash. Just because they have no HP, they don't really jump at all, so they just kind of get grouped up and knocked down, right? So again, Rogue walking out, vanishing, no bleeds whatsoever, and it's obviously it's not as easy as it looks to get the timing down. It's definitely easy to fail that timing, but once you get the timing down, you'll be able to consistently stop that. I believe the Rogue is relying on Vanish CDR to be able to vanish every single one, and whenever he can't vanish it and the Mage is targeted, then the Mage will use greater invis, at least in our group. That's how that worked. So here, Rogue goes out, jump, vanished, No more bleeds for anybody. And that's targeting 4 people, so you know reliably in this phase that everyone is going to be targeted. So evasion also there. Bop works to make you not need to move. Evasion works, but in terms of tanking positioning, we're here because if we can't do that, as you saw, like the mage ran away, if you just run from here targeted to the back of this cave, you're good. You don't need to run any further than that, and you don't need to clear any more space by killing these wolves, which are pretty nasty. Looking at these wolves now, I can go back up a little bit. And really, these wolves hurt, so they get a 20% damage amp for every nearby wolf, which is why you don't want to pull too many of them, especially at the same time. We're just pulling 2 here. We're kind of chilling, because of course there's the random target jump, and there's the bite on the tank, which happens quite early in the pull initially. So if you're having trouble living this, 1, pop a cooldown as you're pulling this pack, or 2, put like a big kidney or something on one of the mobs early on just to desync their bites. Doing one of those 2 things will help you, especially as a tank, but even as the DPSers with those leaps coming out. You see the bites come early. There's the bites coming out early with Last Stand and Demo Shout running, so that helps. And then they will come at one time later on in the pull as well, but using those stuns to desync, there's the big kidney to desync these mobs, very, very helpful. So recommend doing that for these mobs. And we only kill 4 of them. We only kill 4, and that's enough space for us because we use the cave to kite the boss. After that, we do have a bear pull. So fast forwarding to that, past the boss fight, here it is. So we do group every grizzly. And again, you might be saying, that's crazy. They do a ton of tank damage. Remember, the backstepping works on these guys too. Grouping them is like kind of the most dangerous thing. You see I'm doing it in defensive stance here. Want to get some initial aggro just so no one else gets hit. But then this crunch armor and these claws, you can backstep, and you have the big speed boost here because you did Fenrir second. So you're just going to kind of see me backstepping, and then I'm just like, nah, let's circle kite a little bit, because the problem is if you move too far from the grizzlies, they do that little charge, as you saw there. So you kind of want to keep a medium distance where you're too close for them to charge you, but far enough away that you're avoiding all their abilities, right? Like I'm avoiding every single one of their debuffs here. Again, the speed looks kind of erratic because I'm moving very quickly, and there's so many trees here. Terrible. Please, I hate trees. Cut them all down. But yeah, so this is still allowing people to fully AoE these mobs. Right, look at like the range is having no problem at all. The mobs are grouped. They're moving together in a circle, and the circle is relatively small. That guy got Giga Sanguined. Let's ignore that. But that's how you would handle this bear pull. Becomes one of the most dangerous tank pulls to an extremely safe one, where you're not really taking any damage whatsoever. Just a ton of count in that pull for not a very dangerous. And then we move out here, and this is where things get a little spicy. So we haven't done this pull yet, so we do this. The problem with this pull is the marksman will sometimes like to disengage towards the center of the room or the door here, and that can spell disaster sometimes. So this one's not too bad, but after this can be a little rough for sure. So just be careful. Like I said, what you can do is you can tap this pack and you can LOS it back here just to make sure it's safe. But we end up butt pulling these sentinels here. Notice our lust is also coming off CD, so you would want to lust pretty soon on CD here, just because you would almost munch a lust, just because right we have 2 lusts available right now, but not by much. You want to rip this lust kind of wherever you get it, like the next big pull. I don't think it was up for the bears. I think it came up mid. Yeah, it came up when the bears were almost dead. So we just wanted to spend it on their next pull here when we added these guys, when we did these 2 guys alone. Because we are going to do some beer mug shenanigans on the top. Now, what you can do, of course, you can pull 2 sentinels into the non-kickable guy anyways, and that's like a 3 target, but of course, my melee DPS scream whenever you do that. So instead, what we're going to do there, this is what I'm talking about, the dangerous, like jumping into the middle of the room, kind of rough. Make sure you're stopping that penetrating shot, and these guys prevent you from stopping the penetrating shot, so it's a little rough. I think this is where we end up pulling the mob. Yeah, right there. Nice disengage. And this is where things start getting a little rough. But basically what we're going to do to recover this is just kind of run. I believe we end up like Giga LOSing here just to try and get them all out of this like sanguine nonsense and avoid the patrol. Because I believe there's a patrol guy. Yeah, there he is. Right on time. So we just hug the wall here. And we just end up running out to avoid that guy and LOSing to get that marksman not on that table. All the way out here, all the way out, all the way out. And again, Bonus of fighting these guys down here is you still have that speed boost, so it's very easy to avoid these charge pulses. We all run out to here, group these guys up a little bit, finish them off. We have lust rolling still a little bit. Not an ideal lust because of all the movement we had to do, but it's not the end of the world. And like I said, you'd want to kill that pack, and then you'd probably want to do these two sentinels together down here with that speed boost. And then once you've actually killed this pack, not too much to talk about with it. Once you've actually killed it, make sure someone grabs a beer mug. Doesn't matter which one, grab any one. And then you head up onto the ramp here. It does not have guardrails, no matter what anyone says. Don't believe them. And then once you actually get to the top here, what you want to do, I have the beer mug. So what we're going to do is we're going to have one player talk to that guy at the same time I toss the beer mug. Do a little countdown. I throw the beer mug at this guy. His health bar changes. Now this guy's going to become active. What you're going to do is you're going to drag this guy right next to this guy here. That's his health bar is like a little different, and at some point he's going to start swinging, and when he starts swinging, he's then going to reset and become someone who can talk to again to actually cause him to come into combat. So here's reset. You can talk to him. He's a real mob now. So now you can fight two of them at the same time on the first wave, and then the way this works now is that the reset of the actual spawning happens when the first king dies. So when this first guy dies, we can then talk to another one. So we can just chain them, basically, is what this allows you to do. And it seems pretty consistent the way we've done it. The one thing is that sometimes the mug will disappear if you enter combat, which is why you either want to kill those two lightning guys or skip them. Right, so now this guy's talkable, even though we're fighting another king right now. Just watch position, yeah, because he does melee the first person he comes into contact with, so be careful with that. But same idea. Now when King Tor dies, because it's just a king dying, this guy will be interactable. And then you can fight the last two at the same time. So very, very useful for you to chain two of these all the time. Notice we're just kind of kiting the Honored Ancestors. They move so slowly. You don't even need Shackle. You don't even need any kind of CC. You can just slowly move around in a circle. Just know these guys will gain abilities, of course, as mobs die. So, of course, there's two kicks here. Going to be two kicks when you have the next guy. Sever can stack up a little bit here. That's one thing to note as a tank, is that these Sever casts will start stacking up a little bit. So you're going to see here later on, like I think after the next Sever, I have to go do a reset of my debuff before actually interacting with this guy. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty scary, right? I want to get rid of that third stack for sure. Having a fourth stack is going to be definitely pain. You don't want that stacking up too high on your tank. So there, reset stacks, just parried it or dodged anyways, not a big deal. And then we talk to the last guy here. There we go, final cleave. So that's what using those beer mugs lets you do. Kind of lets you almost bug out, but you talk to these guys in a chained fashion, just constantly be able to cleave, and then eventually you'll have just one guy left, which is just kind of single target down. But honestly, pretty significant time save there. Then we move on. We've got Skovald. Those guys are pretty fortified weak. Got your RP. Make sure you pick up the shield ASAP. And how we handled Skovald is to make sure we had consistent positioning of the shield. And what I mean by that is everyone would always know which direction the shield is facing so that they could pre-position, even though I kind of delay it a little bit. And so what that would mean is that I'm always going to make the shield so that the safe area is the center of the room. And everyone in the group knows that. So they know that when that Ragnarok is coming out, they just need to move towards the center of the room and they will be safe. I'm just waiting on RP here. So here comes the first Ragnarok here. 5 seconds. Look at my positioning, right? You're going to see him dash out. I'm going to maintain this position. Ragnarok is coming out. Shield goes up. Everyone knows. Everyone's in the safe spot. We're all fine. Remember, this does ramp up. So like the first kind of pulls of it don't really hurt very much. And there was kind of a little tech here that lets you skip Fellblaze. We were trying to test out a little bit, but that dot still went on everyone. So still trying to get that one figured out entirely because it's been a little inconsistent. Sometimes it's worked where that first Fellblaze, if you time the shield right, has mitigated completely because of the shield. Sometimes it doesn't work. So I will update you guys if that's ever figured out by me. But otherwise, just bringing those Fellblazes out. It's really that initial damage that is scary. Make sure you do pick up that shield, of course, every time Skovald's done. And again, you see me positioning back towards the center of the room here and waiting to actually pop that shield until relatively late in the cast. So even that last movement, I go to the center, like readjustment. They know the center is clear. This is protecting the center of the room. So that's especially for situations like that where it's a very last minute move from the boss. And again, always trying to put the shield in melee, so all of the melee DPS and even the tank myself has uptime on the boss still. Otherwise, this boss is actually quite easy given its nerfed state that they put it in. There's not a ton of damage going out, obviously, especially if you're mitigating these rushes and you're making sure no one else gets cleaved with that dot. As I mentioned, though, the dot's not too bad. It's really the initial damage that is scary, and the shield does block that initial damage, so that is something to note as well. So at least you're blocking that portion of the damage. But overall, don't want to commit lust on this boss because of how easy it is. And then that brings you to Odin, of course. Fast forward to when that boss actually spawns, because our PRP. And the one thing you do want to try and do is not to bait spears towards the middle of the room. It's not the end of the world if you do. You'll see us do it, but it makes it a lot easier if you're kind of dodging from the same direction. So we're going to try and put like all these spears like behind the boss, right? People are generally grouped there. This ad comes out. No one moves over to it. We have a ranged kick ready for it late in the cast. Gets kicked as we move out, and that's why we don't move to that ad, because if Odin was on top of that ad, this ad would have to move so far to get out, and that would hurt melee uptime a significant bit. And so by leaving that ad out here, by assigning a range kick first to it every single time, we can just run to it, melee can hit it as they're moving out, and continue hitting it out here, and we don't move too far. We let Odin kind of walk to us as we're hitting that. Then we hit Odin, have spears on the outside again, and the shatter is coming. Just avoid these balls. Obviously, it's much easier at the beginning of the fight than it is later in the fight. And then we have the runes, and that's what we're saving Bloodlust for. You see, it's been up, but we're going to Bloodlust with this big damage amp from these runes. Just be careful, especially on Tyrannical weeks. This hurts. These runes, you will want to personal. You see blurs like running. It is a pain. So make sure you are prepared. If you're not topped for those runes coming out, pop a health pot, pop a personal, because they do tick very, very hard, especially on Tyrannical weeks. And you do not want to die just before you get your big damage buff, or just before you lust and pop all your CDs, all that kind of stuff. So be careful with that. We have a little bit of bait towards the center of the room here. Again, not ideal, but we're going to cut around this way a little bit to try and avoid being pulled through anything bad. That's the thing you want to avoid, right? Getting pulled through these is very not ideal. Getting pulled into orbs, they almost did there. Also very not ideal, because those still hurt. Those will still stun you. All that kind of good, bad stuff. So make sure you're avoiding that. And you can see, like, by holding our cooldowns and bloodlust and all that stuff for the damage amp phase, like, you absolutely nuke. Definitely what you want to do for this boss, because the longer this goes on, the more spears start dropping from the sky. And look at how much health we just... That's just from the impact of the spears hitting the ground. And as you can imagine, very, very scary on Tyrannical weeks, and something you will want to commit CDs for when you have like 3 spears impacting the ground at the same time. Very, very scary, and that's why you just kind of want to get this boss dead ASAP. So using damage in that damage amp phase, lusting that damage amp phase, is definitely very, very valuable. But there we have it, guys. That is my full walkthrough of a plus 20 timed Halls of Valor. Hopefully you did learn something, and if you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Like it. I've got plenty of more videos just like this one coming up for the remaining Dragonflight dungeons coming very, very soon, so be on the lookout for those. If you have any questions at all regarding this dungeon, feel free to leave that in the comments down below, or come stop by my Twitch channel @Tactics and ask me there, where I also stream all of these high keys and even mythic rating from a tank's POV. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.